So there were a number of huge progressive wins on Tuesday, including three Justice Democrats, Randy Bryce, Christine Halquist, and Ilhan Omar. And these are three candidates that have are incredible on the policy when it comes to universal health care, when it comes to education, living wage, getting money out of politics. So because they're Justice Democrats, because they're supported by groups like Our Revolution, I think one or two of them were supported by the DSA, because of these endorsements, and you could look at their platform on their website, these were fantastic candidates that are detailed on the issues. But that's not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is why I think diversity does matter. Now, there is often this discussion on the more left wing, more progressive side of the spectrum where people are almost adverse to diversity because largely, I think, because of the way that typical liberals or the Democratic establishment have used diversity as a weapon to show that, hey, look, we're for gay people, we're for equal rights. That means we're progressive. When we know that it actually comes down to the policies. But are you for Medicare for all? Are you for universal education? Are you for a living wage? Are you for getting money out of politics? So when you use diversity as a sort of cloud to cloud the your lack of actual policy underneath that, yes, that can be a negative. But there is a serious positive to having diverse candidates as long as they are progressive on the issues, which these candidates are. So I want to focus on Ilhan Omar and Christine Halquist. So first, just a little bit on Ilhan Omar on her background. So this is from The Guardian. Omar moved to Minneapolis in 1997, having fled her birth country of Somalia and lived in a refugee camp in Kenya for 4 years. She was raised by her grandfather and her father, who emphasized to her the importance and power of a democratic system. So at 14, new to Minnesota and having learned English in 3 months, she would attend the caucuses with her grandfather, acting as his translator. Quote, "It was a free process, and it wasn't like the one he was exposed to," she said. "In America, you could be involved in a political party, and you didn't have to be a member of a specific class." Now, showing her background here, I think, is important, and I'm going to discuss more about that after this clip. So this is a clip from CNN after Ilhan Omar won her state seat.
There are young kids, like I once was, who are sitting in refugee camps and find themselves without hopes and dreams, where everyone tells them that the only thing that they should think about is where their next bucket of clean water should come from and where their next meal will come from. And if they get to sleep in a shelter that keeps them away from the sun and the rain. And I think about if the 8-year-old me knew about an Elhan who was in a refugee camp at 8 and became state representative, that would have given me, I think, a lot more hopes and a lot more things to look forward to. And I think my win is really so much more for those 8-year-olds than it is for me at the moment.
So again, this video was taken after she won her state seat. So about a year and a half ago, the race that she just won was for a House seat in Minnesota. So it appears that she'll actually be in Congress in November, as she's in a very blue district. But getting back to the video here. So this is why diversity is so important. People like Ilhan Omar are inspiring to other Somalians, to other people that look like her, to younger people, to people that want to get into politics. And that is important. Having a Congress that is representative of the actual diversity of the country is important, because people that have her experience as a refugee, they share something. They share a knowledge of having that experience, of knowing what it's like. And having that knowledge, that diversity in not just the way you look, but in your actual experiences. Because of the way you look, you have different experiences than other people do. Because of the countries you come from, you have different experiences than other people do. And that benefits when it comes to policy making. That benefits everyone. to have that different perspective. So this is something that I think a lot of people that are the majority race in their country have a hard time understanding. Because unless you are a minority, you don't really understand what it's like to grow up in a country where, on television, the majority of people on TV don't look like you, or the majority of people running your country don't look like you. That matters. That matters especially to younger people who are looking for some sort of guidance into what sort of career path they're going into. And the other aspect of that, actually, I also want to mention just on that last point. So seeing someone else that like Ilhan Omar in Congress, someone that looks like you, also helps improve your own self-worth and makes you recognize that, hey, she was able to do this. She was able to win this race. She was able to get into Congress. I can do that too. So again, it's inspiring. It's inspiring, and it helps to have a Congress that actually reflects the diversity of the country. Now, the other thing I want to add here is that just strategically, politically, it's good. It's brilliant to have great advocates, great diverse advocates that can advocate for progressive policy. So this is what I've said about Bernie Sanders, and some people may disagree with me, but I think it's 100% correct. If Bernie Sanders was anything other than an older white man, I think he would have beat Hillary Clinton. Now that said, it's a weird thought experiment to think up, because Bernie Sanders is who Bernie Sanders is because he grew up as, a Jewish man from New York who has always been on the very progressive side of issues, has always fought for these policies. But just in terms of the identity aspect of it, having somebody like Bernie Sanders who is not Bernie Sanders, so someone like AOC, someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who has the same policies but is more, but is a woman and is a Latina, what that has done, as you have seen over the past couple months, has transformed the conversation around socialism, has transformed the conversation around what is possible for these Democratic Party candidates. So having diversity reflect in our progressive policy is incredibly important in being able to have this message be adopted, not just by people who are deeply into policy, but also by the masses. Now, let me get to this clip from Christine Hallquist, who I think also brings up some great points into why diversity is so vital to democracy.
You ran as a transgender woman. You are one of more than 400 LGBTQ candidates running in this cycle. How important is it that LGBTQ folks have a seat at the table in politics?
Well, I like to talk about all marginalized communities. Certainly one of the things I learned in my transition is, it's one thing to talk about the gender hierarchy. It's the other thing to experience it. So I think we should be talking about all marginalized communities. It's certainly, if I look what's happening, certainly at the national level, there's a systematic attack, and it's going to start, it's going to start with the most marginalized of the communities. So the fact that our president has gone after the transgender community is no surprise, and I think everybody should be afraid.
You talked about Vermont and why you think Vermont is the right place to show the country. So what do you want people around the country, because people are watching all over the country, what do you want them to know about transgender people, that you have this opportunity right now?
Well, I just want people in the rest of the country to know that we are a small percentage of the population, but that really, I would want people to look beyond that. Many people have not met a transgender person, and I understand that it's different. But at the end of the day, we can contribute to the betterment of the world. And when you think about it, if we write people off because of who they are, we may be writing off the next cure for cancer or the cure for climate change.
So Christine Hallquist is running to be the governor of Vermont as a Democrat. And she also brings up some great points here that I want to touch on. So she says, quote, I like to think about all marginalized communities. So when faced with the question about how important it is for transgender people to be represented in government, she relates it back to all marginalized communities. And this is another aspect of why diversity is so important. People that are in that are part of marginalized communities, that are in situations that the majority don't face, what that does is it allows them to then have that personal experience of what it's like fighting against the system, and be able to relate to other people who are also fighting against the system, and be able to relate to working people, to poor people, to middle class people who are all fighting against the system. It creates empathy. So people who have from more marginalized communities generally are more empathetic, and it's no secret as to why. It's because they experience more negativity from the system that they live in. And because of that, they're able to relate to other people who also experience that negativity, who also experience getting pushed down by the system. So what that allows you to then do is be better, once again, at policy making. Have a better understanding at how to create a society, create a system that is beneficial for everyone. And I think another aspect of this that I think she touches on here is having more diversity in Congress, or, you know, in media in general, on television. What it does is it normalizes it. So then once that is normalized, it allows people to then hopefully look beyond the identity and look to actually what that person is about. So the more you see trans people on television or in government, the less you're going to notice them, because you're going to recognize these are just people like everybody else, and their identity isn't who they are. It's what they're about that matters. And that gets down to my main point here at the end. Conservatives continue to have this view of liberals and progressives that we are pushing identity out there, that we are so focused on identity and that's all that matters. And if you're not voting for, you know, a woman or a gay man, then you're or a black person, then you're racist, you're a bigot. That is just not true. I know the conservative media you watch tells you that, but that is just not true. What actually matters to me and to people that I would consider to be progressive or left wing are the actual policies. Policy always comes first. So if Ilhan Omar or Christine Hallquist weren't progressive on the policies, if they weren't for universal health care, if they weren't for a living wage, if they weren't for getting money out of politics, I wouldn't care all that much about these candidates. But because they are progressive on the issues, they show they have an understanding of what people actually need to better their lives. So if you're still focused on their identity, then that's your problem, not my problem. You have to be able to focus on the person, what they are about. So you have to get past these identities. And the reason that I think identity is ultimately important, separate from the policy. So policy for me always comes first. But then diversity, I think, is also important, because what it does, as I've said throughout this entire video, is it inspires people. It reflects the actual country, the diversity of the country. So you have an electorate that understands that there are people looking out for them. And it's not just simply, you know, a majority white Congress that doesn't understand how my life has been, but it is actually a Congress that is more diverse, does understand what issues affect my life. And what it ends up doing is it gets these people more into politics. And when you have an electorate that is more into politics, more following the system, you end up having a system that better represents the people and ultimately becomes a system, a country that works for everyone.